Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 64.
Ben, what was the best console to have as a kid?
Uh, it was Super Nintendo, but that doesn't have a 64 in it. What was it, Josh?
Ah, it was Nintendo 64.
Yes!
You old guy. Super Nintendo is a good answer, and I should give you credit for that. I just keep forgetting that you're so much older than I am. But Nintendo 64 was the hotness. And do you know why it was called the Nintendo 64? Because it went from Nintendo to Super Nintendo to 64.
Yes, as a kid, I was keenly aware of this battle between the console manufacturers to try to get non-technical people on their side as far as like how many bits they were bringing to the party.
That's what it was. The Nintendo 64 was a 64-bit processor and memory architecture. This is a big deal in computer science, the transition from 32 to 64, because it's a complete revamp of everything that's in the guts of the computer, all the way down to the wires, right?
Right.
Just even the silicon, the sand that they have to melt down to create this crap has to be totally different for a 64-bit architecture. And it does give you twice as much addressing space. And that's the key, is that a single value that the processor can hold in its memory is now twice as long, or has twice as many bits, which 2 to the 64 is like 18 quintillion or some nonsense. And so,
Wow.
So one chunk of data that's going through the processor at any given time can be any value between 0 and 1.8 times 10 to the 19th.
So, are we going to talk about the console wars now?
No, not in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, all right.
N64 won. Sega is now a part of Nintendo. I mean, that's the clear, decisive victory.
Well, I kind of want to talk about it. I mean, the thing, like it was like Nintendo was playing the console wars game and getting the most bits, but the most revolutionary thing about that game was the controller.
Well, not necessarily. The most revolutionary thing with the N64 was Mario 64, the game that launched with it, and that was full 3D.
Yeah.
At least for me, that was the first time I'd ever seen polygons in three-dimensional space.
Yeah, but that's just kind of esoteric. Like, whatever computer nonsense is happening behind the scenes, what really matters is the gameplay. And that game wasn't just 3D, it was also a great game. It was a good example of well-designed game. And you had this fantastical, futuristic-looking controller where you could hold it with your hands on the outside like you're used to, or put one in the middle on the 3D stick, and then it just changed everything.
That was the only way to hold the controller, because I can even think of a game that used the D-pad on the far left. You might as well just chop that whole part.
You're totally right, but I did play one game that I used that D-pad a whole awful lot, and I still do.
What game is that?
Tetris.
Oh, well, okay. I mean, if you're playing like the OG game from 40 years ago, on your cutting edge 64-bit processor.
Okay. Well, I too am grateful for the Nintendo 64, and I keep mine at my parents' house, and then whenever I go visit, I play on it for a while every time, and I enjoy it every time.
Now, are you aware that the console wars are over? Well, I guess it's not really over. Nintendo just kind of floats out and does its own thing and has strong enough intellectual property that it continues to propagate. And now it's all about Sony versus Microsoft.
Kinda, Josh, but I've gotten off the, there was a big development that happened this week because Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard.
Yes, making Microsoft the third largest gaming company in the world, behind Sony and Tencent, which very few people have heard of Tencent, but they're the mobile gaming giants. They're the ones that own all of the mobile games that you've ever heard of.
Okay, wow.
They're the number one gaming company in the world, revenue-wise.
Well, this is a podcast about games.
Well, there you go. And life and other things. But yes, I don't want to lose too many people talking about the in-the-weeds stuff about... Honestly, though, this is the important thing now. Is the console wars were a real thing because technology was constantly... it was orders of magnitude jump from one system to the next.
Yeah.
Like you had your NES, which was an 8-bit system. You had the Super Nintendo, which is a 16-bit system, which was important back in those days. For example, there are now images, like a picture that you take with your phone takes up more memory on your phone than the entire original Super Mario Brothers game did in memory. So, having more processing power is important. But nowadays, It's a lot less about the processing power and a whole lot more about the intellectual property that you own.
Yeah, well, we just reached a point where the technology overcame itself. There's a point of diminishing returns when you're having exponential growth in the number of transistors you can cram onto a processor. And there's a point where you just get into the, I don't know, the uncanny valley. Like, we have enough. It's enough. Now it's about the gameplay experience and the richness of the environment and the attraction of the story.
Exactly. Until we have the technology to claw our way out the other side of the uncanny valley, it's going to be all about that intellectual property.
Yeah. Well, this is also a podcast about life and other things, so let's talk about life for a minute, Josh. I know you had set a goal every year to sign up for a half marathon and run it, and that happened last week. So let's hear about what happened.
Oh, so that was
Did you make it?
Fun. I did. All right. So this all starts with this. It starts months before that, when I was absolutely certain that the race was on Saturday morning, and I was raring to go. And then my wife...
It's good foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. Like, in the middle of summertime, I don't even remember when she signed us up, but she's like, hey, the zoo is doing their fundraiser 5K again. My wife and my son both did that race the year before. And the idea is you get a shirt, you walk through the zoo. Like, the race is through the zoo. And then it's for a good cause, and you get in after hours, and they do the zoo lights with their Christmas lights and things. And it's just kind of a cool experience.
Sure.
Which is like, oh, we should all do it this year. I'm like, yes, let's do it. That sounds great.
But these two things were completely separate in your mind. Like the half marathon was the thing you're preparing for, and the zoo 5K was like a family thing, but you didn't connect the two in your mind.
Never connected the two in my mind. It wasn't until weeks later that I realized that those two were happening on the same weekend. So the half marathon was going to be Saturday, and then the following evening on the Sunday night was going to be the zoo 5K.
That sounds terrible, but doable.
That's rough. I'll be sore, but I mean, it's only 3 miles, and the kids aren't going to run the whole thing. I'll just suck it up. Well, then I come to find out, because I was doing research, because for this big half marathon, you can't just show up. Like, you have to go pick up your race packet. You have to register. You have to tell them, hey, yes, I paid and I am coming. Please give me my shirt and my number with my RFID tracking information and stuff on it.
Right.
And this one, like, this race has tens of thousands of people. So you can't just like walk up to a folding table the day of, grab your stuff, and then jump in line to start the race.
Right.
That would be a logistical nightmare. No, they have an entire expo at the convention center. It's the Health and Wellness Expo leading up to this half marathon. And the whole half of the convention hall is dedicated just for people to go in there and check in.
Wow.
And so I'm looking on my phone to try to find the information for what days and times the expo is going to be available, so I can go down there and get my race stuff. And I looked at it and said, oh, the expo is on Saturday from 9 to 5. That's really weird, because that's when the race is. Like, the race is going to have started, and then the expo is going to open? Wait, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, crap. And that's when it all came crashing down onto me.
Oh, no.
The half marathon was first thing on Sunday morning.
Oh, so you signed up for a 13.1 mile race and a 3 mile race in the same day.
Yes. So I had a half marathon to run at 8 a.m., and then I had a 3 mile run at 6 p.m.
Okay. All right.
Still doable, right?
So at any point did Nicole be like, oh, geez, we didn't realize these were on the same day. Okay, you recover from the marathon, I'll take the kids and do the zoo thing.
Oh, no, that was never on the table.
But
like,
who's choosing, hers or yours?
Mine. I'm not backing out of that. And she expressed concern, like, oh, are you going to be okay? Are you going to be too tired? Like, you're going to be able to physically do it? And some of that's pride, like, I'm not that old. I can handle this. And part of it is, well, I mean, I made a commitment. And another part is, well, I'm not going to like leave my kids hanging. Like, oh, I'm not going to come because I'm too tired. They don't get that.
Daddy's a superhero.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to maintain that image in their minds for as long as possible.
Right. Okay. So you got up the morning. You didn't realize, but you were ready to take this whole thing on. But of course, you're going to give your all to the half marathon.
Of course. Like, this is the thing that I've been training for. And it's not like giving my all is just going to be to finish. And it was a real journey. And I'll tell you what, Ben, every year I go there. Sometimes I'm by myself. Sometimes it's with family or friends. But this year I was by myself. And whenever I go, I always have this, I remember why I sign up for it. Like this one specifically. This is like the difference between Grand Prix Vegas and then Friday Night Magic kind of stuff.
Right. Sure.
Friday Night Magic is fun. You want to do it, but Grand Prix Vegas is a whole other thing.
This is an event. The streets are blocked off, and there's thousands of people there.
Yes, and I sent you a semi-facetious text message because it was first thing Sunday morning, and I like to poke the bear. In this case, you're the bear in my metaphor.
Sure.
And I said, I sent you a picture of the tens of thousands of people that were lined up at the start line with me. And I said, I'm about to make my annual contribution to the church of why do people do this again?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what it felt like to me. Like if all these people with like a shared identity, not a shared identity, but like a shared goal. It's like we're all from every walk of life, like every background imaginable, size, shape, creed, idealism, doesn't matter. We all showed up and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to pour all of our energy onto the ground for no reason and then eat a free banana at the end of
it. So do you feel like you were, are you saying that this moment that you texted me about, what emotions I put into your mind when I was imagining what you were going through was a little bit of second thoughts? Like, why am I doing this again?
No, well, I mean, I try to capture the outsider's perspective from that because if you've never done something like that before, you would question, why do people do this? Why would you put yourself through that? But I still did it. Like I showed up and I poured as much of my energy into it as I possibly could. And I walked away feeling content and happy.
Okay.
It's the closest thing that I'm going to have to a religious experience, I think. Just pouring energy into the void and then whatever feelings, there's no feelings coming back. It's just all derived internally.
Well, how'd you do?
So, we can't talk about the end without talking about the journey, Ben. Like, if we were going to talk about a 5K or a 10K, sure, I'll tell you, I started, I ran it, and I was done. No, Ben. A half marathon is a journey and a vision quest, and there's things that happen along the way. I like this one a lot because it's the rock and roll half marathon, and so every couple of miles they have, like, local bands or, like,
I was wondering what the word rock and roll meant here, if it was just facetious. There's actual rock and roll happening.
Yes, they have bands set up every couple of miles, and they're usually like local groups, and they're usually not very good, but they're out there for hours, just pouring their heart and soul into it. The first one was great. It was at the 1 mile mark, and it was these three old people, and it was this old guy singing his heart out, wearing an old leisure suit. And some old lady in a poodle skirt, like just jamming the bass, and some other old guy just going nuts on the drums. And they were playing all the top hits from like 1953.
Wow.
And they were just loving it. They were just loving life, and they were the perfect group to run by first.
That's how you felt at the time. You're old, but you're feeling young again.
So I had several individual moments throughout this race. I want to share a couple with you.
Okay.
So one of them was like ever since I had that deal with my back or my rib or my heart, what I thought was my heart, and it was that scare.
Yeah.
Like I still feel it. Like I go on long runs and it's still there and it's tight in my back and it's just uncomfortable at some points.
Uh-huh.
And so I remember getting about mile 4 or 5 thinking, oh man, I'm getting too old. Maybe I should not think about whether or not I should keep doing this in the future. And then I swear, the second I thought that, I summoned a 75-year-old woman that elbowed past me, on your left, and just keeps trucking past me faster than I was running.
The karma just made her appear out of nowhere.
Yes, she manifested behind me to quash that thought, or just to make me feel stupid for having it.
Nice.
Then there's about the halfway point. I remember thinking, okay, we're about halfway. Oh, no, you know what it was? It was the 8 mile marker. I remember my headphones buzzed and told me I just passed 8 miles. Now, here's the thing. I try every year to get a couple of 10-mile runs in, but this last training year, it just didn't work out for various reasons.
Okay, so 8 miles your max.
That was the longest I'd run during training. I'd done it a couple of times, and it was comfortable and fine, but so I passed the 8 mile mark, and I thought to myself, this is the farthest that I've run in the last 3 calendar years.
And now I'm going to do another 5?
Now, hang on. Let's pause for a second, and I want to explain something to you. So, I don't know how other people run, but when I run, I get into a groove, and I fall into a cruise control mindset, where my body is running, and I am breathing, and I have a pace set, but I'm not paying attention to any of that. All of it gets kind of abstracted away, and my mind is free to pay attention and do other things, and that's why I listen to audiobooks when I'm running. I'm transported to another place, and I'm fully 100% listening to the story, and my body is
Same.
just doing its thing.
So, some people like to listen to like Van Halen or something. No, I'm with you. I want to go. I want to listen to a story.
But here's the thing, like when you're in that state, the worst thing you can do is then think about like how fast you're running or how long your strides are or how your breathing is. Because then now it goes from cruise control back into manual and all of the controls come crashing down on you at the same time.
Yes, you're very aware of everything that's going on.
All right, so I had an inside out moment where on the inside of my brain, all of my little people were just like chilling out, listening to the book that I was listening to at the time. And then I had the thought, oh, this is the farthest that we've run in a couple of years for training. And then simultaneously, they all just looked down at the control panel because they had been ignoring it previously. But they looked down and they realized that, yeah, all of the warning lights are flashing, like multiple meters are pegged out, like there's steam hissing out of joints out of the side.
Yes.
And so, like, for me, physically at this moment, I'm like, oh, this is the farthest I've ever run. And then, like, I felt all of it at the same time, like, oh, crap, I am incredibly tired. I am running uphill. I am breathing super hard. And it was just a really, really terrifying moment for a second.
Yeah. Okay. Can I take a tangent on this for a second?
Sure.
Because I have this problem sometimes where I do, like you said, and abstract it all away. Like, really, when you run, let's take a really long distance, like an entire full marathon, you can break that down and break it down again and break it down again and break it down again until you're just talking about one more step, right?
Right.
So anybody can take one more step, right? Like at what point does one more step just too much? After you take 1,000, is 1,001 too much? What about 2,000? Is 2,001 too much? And it just feels like there's no. It's Zeno's paradox, and it feels like I should be able to run forever because when can I ever not do one more step?
If you try to think about it mathematically, yes, you're correct. But when you think about it in the real world, I always think about my body as a machine, and there's a point where I'm going to run out of gas. And that's just it. Like at some point, the biomechanics of my meat sack are just going to stop working.
So is that what you're hinting at here? Did you run out of gas?
No, I did not run out of gas. But it was just I was keenly aware of the exertion in that moment, and I hadn't been for the previous like 4 or 5 miles. And so it was just like a dramatic wake-up call for a second is all.
So did you have to get your guys at the controls in your head to ignore the console again?
Basically. I just recognized...
Stop paying attention to that, guys.
It's like, oh, that was a mistake. And I rewound my book like for one full minute, and I got back into the story, and then everything was fine. We're okay. Good. We'll just forget about that for a second. And then in this marathon, this half marathon, there is a point at mile 9 where from miles 9 to mile 10, it is uphill. There is a big hill that you run to the top of this hill, and then you turn around and then you come back down. And
it's designed like this on purpose.
It's just a little dog leg that they throw in because they need an extra mile in the course. And so there's this convenient little access road that just goes straight up this hill, and then you turn around and come right back down. And it's funny because you can always I love every year they have the RFID checkpoints at the bottom and at the top, and so if you're going to place or if you want to like actually get a trophy or something in your division or whatever, you have to go to the top of the hill. But there's a ton of people that don't.
Oh, that's interesting. They just get there and they know that it's a hill and they just skip it.
Well, because it's one road. Like on the right lane is everybody going up and the left lane is everybody coming down. And so as you're going both directions, as you're running up and as you're running down, you see a bunch of people get like halfway, a quarter of the way, almost all the way, and just bail. It's like, screw it, this is enough for me. And they'll just turn around and start going back down.
That seems kind of odd to me, Josh. You talk about this as like there's just people walking down the street and like, oh, what are those guys doing over there? Oh, it looks like they're running. I guess I'll join in. Like, these are not those people. These are people that did like you did, and they signed up for this a year in advance, and they've been preparing for it. Why would they skip a mile of the course?
Why? Who cares? Like, this is the thing. Like,
they care. That's why they're there.
Every year I do this, and every year I see somebody will jump over the line and just start going back down the hill. And there's always a couple of people that'll like give them crap for it. Like, oh, I ran the whole thing. But I'm over here like, man, they paid the same amount of money. Whatever value they derive out of this, they're getting it, and they're just recognizing the sunk cost. Like, they don't want to run up this hill. They don't have to. If it's going to make their time more enjoyable, then let them do them.
Okay, but you can take that thing to the same extreme that I was talking about, abstracting a race into taking one more step. You can just not take any more steps. The race is over right now. I'm stopping and calling an Uber.
I don't know. I didn't. I have always run to the top of this hill. And what drives me nuts is I always forget, because it's not just you don't get to the top and then immediately turn around and come back down. You crest the top and then you run like 200 yards down the other side and then you turn around. So then not only did you just truck half a mile up this hill, you've got to run another like 200 yards back up to the top after you've already gotten there. That's the part that kills you.
Okay.
But here's the thing. I ran to the top of the hill. I ran back down to the hill, and then before that, there was all the bands and people were having a good time, and there's people along the side of the road dinging the cowbells. Side note, what is it with cowbells and long races like this? Everybody's cowbells.
I don't know. You know, a year ago I ran a marathon, right? There was no one banging cowbells in that race.
Well, cowbells are a thing. Anyway, from miles 10 to the end of the race, miles 10 to 13 is after this big hill, and it's like all the energy is gone. Like before that, there's people talking, having a good time, and chatter and things. Like you can hear it all around you. After that, those 3 miles are almost dead silent, and all you hear is footfalls. And that's the part of the race where I might have texted you about it afterward, but like for me at least, I have no better verbiage than this. It really feels like a test of faith, because you start asking yourself all the same questions. Like I was there running, like I'm at mile 11 and a half to 12, and I'm like, why am I doing this? This is really hard. I could walk for a little bit and no one would care. I could just be a little bit slower. I could ease up on all of this. I don't even have to do this at all. Like this is all gravy from here on out. Like why take another step? This is so ridiculously painful now.
So when I was a kid, I used to watch, we didn't have that many television channels. We just got like broadcast television. I used to watch PBS, Public Broadcasting Television. There was like 3-2-1 Contact on there. And it was kind of cyclical in that you'd see the same episodes over and over. And there was one little vignette they would do about running a marathon. And as a kid, I'd never done anything like this. You know, I'd barely run like a mile in gym class. And every time they would interview these people that were preparing to run a marathon and going to run a marathon. And I must have seen this segment maybe a dozen times in my life. And they would always talk about what they called the wall. And all these people were talking about this proverbial wall that you run into when you're running a marathon. And they said it's at mile 20. That's when you hit the wall. And as a kid, I didn't understand what they were talking about because I had kid energy. You know, I've never done anything where I felt like I'd reached the end of my energy. If you're a kid and you're running and you've run too far, you're just like, well, that sucks. I'm not doing that anymore. But you don't feel like you hit a wall. And so my whole life, I just imagined what that would be like until I actually did it. And there was no wall. I don't know what those people were talking about. They didn't train right.
You're telling this whole story about the wall and you don't even know what the wall is?
No.
You've never experienced the wall?
I still haven't.
Well, I experienced the wall at mile 11 on this run.
Okay.
And like I was toast. But I powered through. That is 100% mind over matter kind of thing. Like, sorry, body, we're on cruise control. We're finishing this thing.
Well, I've heard scientifically it's like when your body finishes consuming like your ready energy reserves and transitions to like fat supplies or something like that.
Oh, does it take me 11 miles to burn off the Dr. Pepper I drink a day?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's terrifying. I need to look at my eating habits. No, but I felt that. I had that moment where I questioned everything that I believed in and what had brought me there, and I powered through and I kept going.
Okay.
And so then we come to the end of the race, and my favorite part, and that is all the free stuff that they give you. As soon as I cross the finish line and immediately stop, like, oh, that was terrible. And
I'm doing it again next year.
I'll do it again next year. But they have all the people, like, and the big races like this, they have a ton of these, and it's just like refueling station, because there was also a full marathon that was happening. And I will say, at the very end, the last like 300 yards of this race is over a bridge going over like an artificial lake that we have in Tempe, Arizona. And on one side of the bridge that I was on is all the half marathoners just trucking. We're doing like our between 2 hours and 2 hours and 20 minutes. That's my group that I'm in. But on the other side of the bridge is the full marathoners. And so the people coming in at like 2.5 hours for the full marathon, those are the guys that have like the chaser vehicles that are in the top of peak physical condition, top of their game. And they've been running, I don't even know how fast, for 20-something miles. And I saw one come sprinting past me to the end of his full marathon. And I had no energy left. I cheered for him. Like, that was amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
Go, guy. That will never be me, and I have no desire to be that man.
Yeah, I want YouTube. So Nike's been promoting the heck out of this Kenyan or some country in Africa. This runner named Eliud Kipchoge, and he ran the first ever sub 2 hour marathon, and it was done under absolutely ideal conditions. They did it in Austria where the streets were all closed, and he had like this team of runners that would run with him in like a V formation, and when they would get tired, they would swap out, and they were behind a chase car that used lasers to put a pattern on the ground that they would stay in, and it had to be far enough that it wasn't considered wind aiding and stuff. But anyway, I watched this entire YouTube video. I'll put a link in the show notes. But it's absolutely mind-blowing that I was able to watch this person run for 2 hours. But he was running like 4-minute miles, 26 miles in a row.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Anyway, I crossed the finish line, and I'm on empty. I'd hit the wall, and I need fuel. Like, my stomach was growling, like, because I was so hungry at this point. And I'm walking past all these. They got the standard food vendors, and then they got the weird ones. And I was looking for the chocolate milk. This race always has chocolate milk, but not this year, and I was so disappointed.
Did you get your free banana?
Yes. And it's like, oh, we've got bananas. I'm like, outstanding, give me 3. And I put them in my tiny pockets. And it's like, oh, we have cereal bars. They're crunchy and soft. They can't be both. I'll take 2 of those. And like, put them in my pockets. I'm like, oh, we have fruit snacks. I absolutely hate fruit snacks. Give me 3. And I took 3 of those. And somebody's like, oh, do you want a Gatorade? Yes, I do. And he handed me a Gatorade, and it was like right out of the box. So it's like,
wow, you weren't kidding.
It's like warm, and I take 3 more steps, and like, oh, we have cold Gatorade. I'm like, great. And I took the hot Gatorade that was in my hand, and I shoved my fist into the ice and left it there, and I pulled out another Gatorade that was exactly the same temperature. And 3 more steps, and somebody handed me 3 bottles of water. And then a couple more steps, and I got to the this race also has a beer garden, and everybody that runs gets 2 free beers.
Wow.
Here's the problem.
Free in air quotes. How much did you pay to join this race?
That is irrelevant. It is a sunk cost. I paid it in 2020. But this year it was Heineken, and they were all about their health kick. And like, oh, we have this great low-carb, low-cal, zero-alcohol beer.
Why would they be trying to give that to people that just ran a half marathon?
Okay, so beer after a half marathon is great. I'm going to say that. Like, it's wonderful. The one time I ran my full marathon, I thought I was going to die, and my dad said, no, you just need food. And I had a bacon cheeseburger, 3 fries, a vanilla shake, some chicken nuggets, 2 beers, and a Gatorade, and I felt fantastic after that.
Yeah.
So I was looking forward to having all of these weird things just pour them into my body, like Doc Brown pouring all the stuff into Mr. Fusion to make him work. That's what I wanted. But Heineken had this alcohol-free beer that they were trying to pitch.
He did give him banana and a beer.
And he did give banana beer, didn't he? There you go. The DeLorean had just run a marathon. Heineken was doing this alcohol-free beer, and nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted any of it. Like, they were giving away cases of it. Like, I had a whole case of this stuff in my hands at one point, and it was just cans of alcohol-free beer. And I found a clear patch of grass, and I sat it down, and I poured all of the stuff out of my tiny pockets, and I stretched and ate every scrap of it. And I did not drink the beer, or the near beer, or whatever it was, because I didn't particularly want it at that moment, but I took the case with me. And then I'm trying to leave after I'd sat there for a few minutes. I don't have any friends there. I don't have any family there. So I'm like, well, I can just go home, I guess. And I start walking out of the park because the finish line was in this park. And there's a security guard at the exit of the park. And there's this giant pile of these Heineken cans next to him. And he goes, I'm sorry, you can't leave with the Heineken.
No.
And I'm like, it's alcohol free. And he's like, you got to leave it here. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. And I just set my case down and kept going.
Wow. Somebody didn't think that through.
It was the dumbest and the funniest thing of that day.
Yeah, promotion fail. Okay, so you get home, and how many hours is it now until you got to run a 5K?
I had plenty of time. I got home at like lunchtime. I think I brought food home.
Did you take a nap?
There's a lot. I've lost some hours in the middle of that day. I believe I came home with food to eat for the family. I ate something. I believe I showered for a very long time. And then I do remember waking up on the couch. I don't remember falling asleep there, but I do remember waking up there. And then it was like, hey, we got to go through the zoo in like an hour. I'm like, I had another moment where All right, so I talked about this the first time when I took my son to that super late birthday party at the trampoline gym, when all I wanted to do was leave, and I was so fed up with the whole situation. But then I saw how excited he was and realized all I had to do to be a good dad was suck it up and sit there for another
I
hour.
like this part of you, Josh.
And this is one of those moments I had again where, you know what?
I just want to stay here on the couch.
I just want to stay here on the couch and just sleep more. But all I have to do to be a good dad is drive my kids to the zoo and then walk around for an hour.
Okay, you said that, but at the time you're like, oh my gosh, this 5K, and you were worried about it like it was running another race, but you sent me a photo and it just looked like you guys were taking a walk in the park.
So the first mile of this 5K, they just had to pad out the distance, and so it was back and forth in their parking lot. So you had to go back and forth in these slaloms that they set up in their parking lot like 4 times. It was really lame. So both my wife and I grabbed one of the kids by the hand, like, we're going to get through this as quickly as possible. And we actually ran that first mile. And that did suck, and my legs did hurt.
Plan a better course, guys, honestly.
All right, so it wasn't great for the zoo in like, there's only 2,000 people there, but like the pathways were narrow enough that they were trying to have two-way traffic, and it was single file on either side at some points. Like, it was, the whole thing is just not set up for what they were trying to do.
I see.
But that didn't matter because we got to see all the lights, and some of the animals were out, and they had hot cocoa and free kettle corn at the end of it. And so, like, my kids had a blast. And then afterwards, we got to stick around in the zoo. It was open for like another 2 hours. And they got to go on the little playground with the cave. And it was at nighttime now, so it was all different and cool for them. And it just came back to that idea that all I had to do was do this walk. And we went to that little playground because the kids didn't care about the animals at that point. They just wanted to play in the playgrounds. And I sat down, and I just let them rage, and that's all I had to do.
Let me ask you a question. Your kids are 10 and 6 right now?
10 and 7.
10 and 7. Okay. Did they know you'd run a half marathon that morning?
Yeah, but they have no concept of what that is.
Right. That's what I'm asking. They didn't have any conception at all of you and the toll on your body and the exertion and the energy. Like, did they express anything that showed there was a thought in their mind given towards that you were exerting yourself here?
My son might have had an abstract idea that I was tired. But
Daddy's tired.
Yeah. It's like, oh, he seems really tired. And then, like, when we finished the 5K at the zoo, they're like, oh, that took a long time. And I'm like, go do it 3 more times. And he goes, what do you mean? I'm like, that's how far I went this morning. And, like, my daughter just nothing, like water on a duck's back. Like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
My son's like, oh, that's a long way. I'm like, yeah, that's a long way. But he still didn't get, like, how much it took out of me.
Okay. All right. Well, good job. Good job meeting your personal objectives as well as being a good dad.
Yay.
Proud of you, buddy.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. Well, that kind of brings us back to what we talked about last time, where we talked about the goals that we set for ourselves and why. So I kind of poured my heart out as far as like what was going through my mind is I'm just doing my annual reflection on my life of the past year and thinking about what I want to do for the next year and how that's going to lead me towards success and the things I want to do in the next 5 or 10 years. And I kind of poured all this out on you, and we had a discussion, and I came up with my goals, and I'll tell you what mine were in a second that I settled on since you limited me to 3. But then, like, right after we got done with that, we published the episode and put it out for people to listen to, I started getting feedback from listeners, and they were also thinking through these things, and I love it. But right after that, one of our favorite internet personalities, CGP Grey, published a video about making resolutions, and you sent me his video, and it was like 5 minutes after it had gone up on the internet. Do you want to talk about that video?
I do, but before I talk about the video, I want to talk about
link in the show notes.
Link in the show notes. CGP Grey sponsor the podcast. No, but so it was listeners giving you feedback about resolutions, which is great, but I don't think you recognize, like, in the moment. I was listening back to our last episode, and there was a moment where I had a real, not a crisis, but like a real moment of self-reflection. Because I'm always... I
kind of remember it because I've listened to him several times, and you said something to the effect of, like, am I being serious enough about my life?
Yes, to that effect. Because
at
the whole beginning of the thing, like, oh, resolutions are for chumps that don't have their act together. And then, oh, 5-year plans are for people that think they know what the future is going to hold. Then all of that kind of like, I have all of these separate thoughts in my head, and they're all true to some extent. But when you put them all together, I hadn't lined them all up and looked at them at the same time. But when you do, it's like, I'm really not taking, like, I want to be this person that takes agency and claims that I have control over my actions and the things that happen to me and my family. But all of those thoughts then lined up together just seem like, oh, I'm on coast, man. Like, I'm just doing whatever is going on. And I was thinking about that real hard ever since we had recorded that podcast that day. And the whole weekend, it was just like churning in my brain, like, well, I need to get, I don't know, not necessarily back on track, but I need to be more deliberate about the things and the things I'm deciding and the actions that I'm taking and the plans that I'm making. And then, lo and behold, our favorite internet personality drops a video about a system that he uses that has developed, and he's developed a product specifically to implement this thing. And at first I was like, well, I've heard him on his other podcast talk about like some of this tracking stuff that he does. But I watched the first part of the video, and there was just the mechanics of his goal setting, like his short-term goal setting. I immediately fell in love with, like, okay, this is something that I can totally get behind. And so...
Yeah. I've heard him talk about this in the past, and he had... You could tell there was something underneath. I didn't realize he was so deliberate about it. Like, occasionally he would talk about things like... Operation Get Fit, or I can't remember. He had a buzzword that he used for referring to
Fitatron 5000.
Fitatron 5000, like that. And you could tell that once he had gone through all this mechanical process for deciding how he was going to achieve his goals, at the end he would kind of step back and look at it, and then he would assign like a theme, and that's what he was calling it, was, you know, having a theme of the year.
So he has a podcast called Cortex and it's all about like business and productivity and stuff like this. And I don't listen to it anymore, but I listened to it years ago. And this guy, CGP Grey, is all about systems and math and tracking and metrics collection and like doing the time logs of your days and that kind of thing. This is why at first I was super skeptical, because any system that he comes up with is going to be very, very hardcore. And I'm not committed enough to a super hardcore system. Like, I don't want something that's going to be so huge and overhead in my life.
Yeah, I understand that.
But at the same time, I appreciate his more scientific and quantitative approach to making and then pursuing goals. So that's why he had my ear. Like, I'm listening because I agree with your approaches to things, but I don't want to dive into the deep end of spreadsheeting my day. But the one thing that he had that I'm absolutely going to do is he said, like, oh, well, here on this like chart, and it was just the XY axis chart, and it's like you write your goals, and the idea is that every day you go back and look at these handful of minor goals, and it's a toggle, yes or no. Did I achieve this goal today? And what really sold me on this was that he said, oh, and you can assign partial credit. So, like, for example, one of his goals was fitness. It's like, oh, well, I want to do like a 45-minute to a 1-hour workout every day. And that's full credit. But if I don't make it, if I just do something physical, go for a walk or whatever for like 15 minutes. Do a push-up. Yeah, do something for 10 minutes. That's my partial credit, and I'll get a half check for that day. And I immediately was like, that is a concept I can get behind, because there are some days where you're just not going to achieve these things. But if you had some way of not just tracking, but then writing down, like, okay, I am absolutely dedicated to this thing. The goal is to go out for a run or do a full 1-hour workout every day, but sometimes it's not going to happen. So if I can make this smaller, more achievable goal that is obviously a compromise, but still working towards the thing that I want, then that's still a win. That's still victory.
Okay, so what are you going to do?
So he is hawking this plan in the form of a journal. And at first I was like, well, I don't need a thing. I can do this on a spreadsheet. But then he said something that really clicked in my brain. It's like having the physical thing in your universe that you look at and have to like pick up and move to get out of your way is going to help drive you to actually open it and do it every day. And so I want to give this a real try. So I actually ordered the notebook thing that he had on his website, and which my wife is giving me no end of crap about.
Why?
Because I'm not this guy.
This is the kind of thing wives get behind.
But I'm not that guy. Like she thinks this is a fad thing, and it might be. I hope it's not. I want to dedicate to it, but she thinks it's like, oh, you saw a video
Of all the
of
things
a
to
guy
give you
selling
crap about wasting $20 on.
you saw a video about a guy selling a thing, and you bought the thing like 2 hours later.
I guess when you put it that way.
Right? Yeah, that's what got me. I'm like, I mean, and I get a little defensive because, yeah, I'm not that guy, but I want to give this a real shot, and I think this will be a good tool to help me try, so I'm going to do it.
So do you have the book now?
Funny you should mention. Let's transition to Josh versus Bureaucracy for a second,
Why?
Shall we?
How hard is it to order a book?
So I ordered the book off of the website that he linked to like an hour after he published that video, okay?
Right.
And then the website was kind of like, oh, we've received your order. And then 5 seconds later, I got another email. We've processed your credit card. Your order will ship in the next 5 days. Okay, great. I waited the full 5 days, and then I waited a full 8 days. And then I sent an email to their support like, hey, here's my order number. Haven't heard nothing. What's the thing? And then, lo and behold, 15 minutes later, I get an email. Oh, your order has created a tracking label. Oh, your order has been shipped. And then I get an email from support, and it's like, oh, sorry about the delay. We've had a huge influx of orders, and oh, I just checked on your order, and it looks like it's shipped out of our warehouse just today. I'm like, funny. Good.
Wow.
Way to try to sneak that in. There is absolutely no chance that shipped just by happenstance. You know what I mean?
Yes. Can I take a completely unrelated tangent right now?
Please. That's the sum total. That's the end of my story. This book should show up in a couple days.
Congratulations. I'll check in with you later in the year. I want to hear how that's going. I have a secret about that I'm not going to tell you right now. I'll tell you later. Okay, so I saw this post on Facebook this week. You and I have talked in the past about kind of the drama surrounding the fact that when you're in the military, you move on average every 2 to 3 years. Just move your entire family and household goods. And it's almost considered a given that when you pay the minimum bidder to move an entire family's household goods, stuff is going to break. It was kind of the old world clashing with the new world. So this woman had bought one of those Apple AirTags that you can put on an important thing that you don't want to lose, especially if you're the kind of person that loses things a lot. And what I didn't know, because I haven't actually shopped for these, is how effective their range is and how long their battery life is. Like if I stick it on my keys and then I lose my keys, how long do I have to find them before the battery on this thing runs out? Apparently it's a long time. So what she did is she bought one of these and she stuck it in her household goods so that then when they came and packaged up all of her belongings and put them in a container and shipped them away, she could track them independent of the company.
Ooh, you don't want to know that stuff.
Right. I know I wouldn't have even have thought of it, but she just wanted to have a way, because they don't make it easy for you to track your stuff. So she just wanted to have a way to do it, and it's relatively low cost. I mean, our infrastructure has reached the point now where this is viable, that we have our own GPS tracking of our household goods for virtually no cost.
I have absolutely no argument against what you're saying, other than sometimes you just don't want to know how the sausage is made.
You are absolutely right, and apparently that's what happens. So they're waiting for their household goods, and you get the system automated notices, just like you're talking about with your book that you'd ordered, that this thing is supposed to be here, and she can just go to a website, put in the ID of this thing, it's already tagged, and she can just look at where her stuff is. So they've moved to the new town, they're living in a hotel or temporary living facility, and they're waiting for their household goods to arrive so they can move into their house and resume their normal life. And she sees that their stuff is in town. So she contacts the company and asks them where it is. She doesn't say, I know where it is. She says, where's my stuff? And they're like, they give her the standard answer that you always give. Now, you can either think that they know and they're deliberately lying to you, or you can think maybe she knows better than they do. The person that they give you to call.
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the company's bureaucracy, right? There is some process that has to happen where they've got to schedule some local guys to come out to your place, and there's a logistic chain that has to happen.
Right, and there's multiple parties. There's the people that move it, and then there's the people that deliver it and unpack it, and those might be different parties. There's the potential it could be held at some place, or there's some kind of queue waiting for the labor, or whatever. But whatever the case was, she knew very clearly that they were lying to her about the location of it. Now, the thing, lie might be too harsh of a word, because they might just be used to not having the information, telling you some platitude, not because they know, but just because that's their standard line.
Well, I don't know. If I'm a logistics company and I know that your household goods are like a mile from your house, but if I tell you that, now I have to spend another 15 minutes on the phone convincing you that no, you can't just take your truck to the warehouse and start pulling your crap out of boxes. That's not going to happen. But I don't want to spend that amount of energy making you understand that. So it's a whole lot easier.
So it's better to make you think it's halfway across the country.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to say, oh, it's still in Denver. Got to give it a couple more days.
Well, we've now reached the point where they can't get away with that anymore. So she tells them she knows where it is and provides proof. And it turns out that it was at the truck driver's personal residence. And they didn't seem to know that or think that was okay. So then it turned into like this investigation, but whatever. Similar to your experience with your book, they're like, oh yeah, look at that. The system just generated your tracking label and it's on its way.
Okay, I'll go ahead and let's we both know that we're lying to each other, but we'll go forward just to make society work better.
Yes, but now I feel like, other ways that we had that same kind of thing happen in our society, we've reached the point where our technology and the ubiquity of access and stuff, we can do that kind of thing. I fully intend to do that exact thing next time I participate in this process.
Part of me feels like that's, I don't know, like it's at the truck driver's residence. Okay, so that tells me that, it's an independent truck driver that they got as the lowest bidder, and he said he could have it to X place by date X, and that's the date that they put in their system. And if he decided to get hopped up on whatever crazy drugs that truck drivers get hopped up on and pull an all-nighter so he can have like a day off with his wife and kids, knowing he doesn't have to drop this crap off until the day after, I mean, I'm kind of over here shrugging. Like, he got there by the deadline.
So I kind of have this curiosity about truck drivers. Like, I bought a book. I read an entire book that was like a nonfiction memoir of a truck driver, just because I'm fascinated with their life and existence. And this is an industry that's crashing headlong into the friction of modernization. Like, they're starting to put tracking devices in their cabs and stuff like that, and it's making it so they can't do what you're saying anymore. You can't just take drugs and drive across the country. Like, they're tracking how long you're on the road to make sure you're following the rules about how long you're allowed to be on the road.
Well, let's take that a step further and realize that with self-driving cars, like, the truck driver industry is on its downhill leg as it is anyway.
Yes. We're very much in that twilight. Similar to, I think, maybe it was you that had said this. I can't remember. One of my sons reminded me of it. That we're in that age where we've reached the level of technology where we could detect an asteroid coming to destroy the Earth, but we can't yet do anything about it. And it's just this sliver of time, because soon enough we'll reach the point where we can do something about it. But until we get there, we're just in this weird nether region.
Yeah, so truck drivers are in the weird nether region. Ooh,
yeah,
truck drivers
where you can just track their every minute, but they still have to drive like they're 100 years ago.
Yeah, this is another industry that technology is ruining. Thanks, technology.
Okay, so here are my goals. You limited me to 3. So these are specific, measurable, actionable. What is the R again? Realistic and timely. Okay, so I'm going to get an excellent on my fitness test in June. That one's easy, and that breaks down in a whole bunch of sub-goals, but it's easy enough to understand and say really fast.
Yeah, but for your age bracket, I mean, you have to do like 3 sit-ups and a push-up?
We can break it down later. The second is I'm going to finish my writing course that I'm currently taking with the university, and I'm going to write the first chapter of my book before the end of the year.
Okay.
And the third is I want to reach mastery level on my cold gravy list. If you want to hear what a cold gravy list is, listen to episode 63. I have my list. There's one item on it I need to check with my wife. But when I realized the ones I hadn't mastered yet on my list are all spiritual related. It's about the level of which I kind of devote my thoughts and actions to my faith in God. And it made me realize how thankful I am for my wife, that she kind of stands as the guardian of that. Yeah, I'm grateful that Alicia cares about my spirituality and kind of stands there reminding me, like like the same way the Air Force cares about my physical fitness, my wife cares about my relationship with God.
That's funny because it seems like we have two different images in our head. Because in your mind, your wife is like helping you with a hand on your arm, escorting you up this hill. Like, come on, we can do this together. And in my mind, your wife is in a golf cart with a bullhorn yelling at you to get up this freaking hill. You're slacking.
Yeah, I'm okay with either of those images. Okay, so we're going to peek behind the curtain of the Bad at Magic podcast right now. Last 2 weeks ago when we recorded episode 63, I was utilizing a piece of hardware that was failing because it's not important why it was failing, but it was generating static and it caused the app to crash and it caused a bunch of interference in the audio signal that was recorded. And it made a big chunk of episode 63 unusable. So
I thought we talked for longer than an hour and 45 minutes.
yeah. So my microphone has been sent back for warranty service. I was happy with the level of response I got from the manufacturer on that because I didn't even have a receipt for that microphone, and I think they're going to send me a new one.
Nice.
But I'm talking to you on my backup mic right now, and I would like to recreate some of what we did. So, Josh, right now in the public zeitgeist, kind of popular in both pop culture with the music as well as the film itself, is Disney's animated adventure Encanto.
Oh, Encanto, yes.
Let's give it the full Bad at Magic review.
Oh, the full review? All right, so you're
Yeah.
going to do some meta stuff, and then I'm going to do the plot synopsis?
And then we'll give it, and then we'll rate its use of magic.
Excellent. All right, in 20 minutes, ready, go.
Okay, so you know, Disney's trying to recapture the magic of the past and creating animated adventures, and sometimes it feels like they're coloring by numbers, but this one really felt like it was coming from the heart.
Yeah, also,
it's another in the series, kind of along the lines of Coco, where they're going to like Latin America and trying to touch on cultures and ideas that they haven't before.
We also might be jumping on the Lin-Manuel Miranda bandwagon.
Absolutely, yes. which kind of speaks to the quality of the music in it. So it's set in Colombia, and there's a magical family. Yeah, and like you said, that there's this other stuff happening in the background that's feeding into this, that it didn't feel like a traditional Disney musical.
No, it did feel like its own unique and set off individual property. And story-wise, it's the family is magical. They have magic. That is just accepted, almost to a hand-wavy degree. And
yeah.
Everybody in this family gets a gift at their coming of age at some predetermined birthday. Not a kid, like the kid was 12 or something. Doesn't matter, except for one of the kids. One of Mirabelle. Mirabelle, Isabel, something. It ends in Bell. It's voiced by the girl from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's fantastic. Anyway,
I didn't know that.
She doesn't have a gift, and it's weird because that's important, and at the same time not important. The idea is that part of this movie, like the magic starts to fail, and then nobody believes her, and she goes on this quest to discover why the magic in the family is failing. And this movie, I'm not gonna lie, I had low expectations going into it because I thought it was a Disney cash grab with Lin-Manuel Miranda, but I was pleasantly surprised at several turns that happened in this film. For example, sorry.
Ahead.
Okay, I was just going to launch into my examples of what I like this movie about.
Sure.
The first one my wife had to point out to me after the fact is the main character's oldest sister. Is her superpower or her magical gift is that she's basically Superman.
She's really strong.
Really strong and indestructible. And she's out in the town always doing the heavy lifting. Like in one scene there, she's moving a church. How often does a town need a church moved? But that doesn't matter. But and what's interesting is that then this character had a song routine about like there was just stress and pressure in her life, and my wife pointed out after the fact that she was already like so over it because she thought for certain that this character was going to sing about how the boys don't like her because she was 7 feet tall and looked like the Incredible Hulk, but it wasn't. Like she sang a whole song about how she was being weighed down by expectations and this pressure that she felt to perform at her best and her peak all the time.
Yeah, and I want to talk about this more lately because I think that kind of thing is done deliberately by storytellers where they have a character and they introduce it and they're playing on the fact that the viewer are going to have an expectation for what that character's arc is going to be because of past stories you've consumed and similarities with that character. So your wife thought this character is going to fit this mold because that's what we expect in this situation.
Right. And honestly, I really like that character. I identified very closely with this character. I think everybody at some point has felt, doesn't matter how well you're doing, you always have that lingering fear of inadequacy that just rides you. But it
didn't turn into a shallow, I'm not romantically worthy kind of trope.
It did not turn into that. It turned into something much more deep and relatable. And after my wife pointed it out, I realized that was one of the main reasons that I really like that character, is that they went for a more difficult story to tell.
Yeah, cool. I like that too. I watched it the first time, and like you said, the main character that didn't have a power, I kind of felt like, oh no, this is going to be a problem. Oh no, she doesn't have a power. Everyone else has a power. This is going to be the central conflict of the movie. And she was just like, it's okay. And somebody would go like, oh no, you don't have power. She's like, I'm okay. And everyone would be like, oh no. And then you realize this is going to be the conflict, and her denial is part of it.
Yeah. Yes, because like, oh, she doesn't have a power. Clearly this is going to be the conflict. And then, oh, it's not going to be the conflict. Oh, but it's part of the conflict. Like her not having this power is causing these problems with the expectations of the whole family. And I will say that I appreciate the fact that Disney kind of stuck to their guns on this, that Mirabelle did not get a power at the end of the movie. The movie ended and the character did not. I thought for certain, like, this is going to be the thing that happens.
Right. This, again, they're subverting your expectations and doing something you didn't expect, and you found that pleasant instead of disconcerting.
But they subverted my expectations in a way that was that furthered the plot, that made the story better, not just for cheap thrills, but in a way that mattered.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
Totally unlike Frozen, but I'm not going to go there. Another thing,
it's not hard to get you to rant about Frozen.
Oh no. Another thing that I really appreciate of this movie that is very random is I am honestly surprised at the end of the movie that they told such a deep, complex story in basically one house. They did not have very many set pieces for this movie. Usually these movies are all about orphans, because you have to be orphans, going on giant, elaborate adventures to faraway places, but they just stayed in their house the whole time.
Yeah, it was kind of a hurricane in a teacup. It definitely wasn't an epic journey.
Now, that said, they did cheat a little bit with the whole Doctor Who's like bedrooms thing, where she went into
it's bigger on the inside.
Yeah, she went into her uncle's room, and it was like a freaking crumbling
Indiana
temple
Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yes, it was like a Prince of Persia set. Like, wow, this is just in the house, I guess. It's fine.
Yeah. So let's talk about the magic system for a minute. So on the Bad at Magic podcast, we examine magic systems, and this is a great place to apply that kind of thing. So first of all, we talk about whether it's hard magic or soft magic. Hard magic is magic where you know and understand the rules for interacting with the magic. This is the softest of magic.
They tried to have rules, but then broke all of them. So yeah, This is way softer.
We don't really know where it came from. We don't know what makes it work. We don't know how it started. We don't know if it's going to stop. We don't know why she didn't give a power. We don't know who the next guy's going to get a power. We don't know what the limits are. We don't know any of that.
Oh, the source of all the magic is this candle, and this candle can never go out. Oh, but it went out. Oh, but the candle came back. Like, oh, wait, just you're going to set up rules just so you can break them to have like a fun. You see that right there. When the candle goes out and then they got the candle back, that is a subversion of expectations for no reason other than to try to get a cheap thrill out of us.
Yeah, you're right. And that one felt very familiar. I mean, it was the same as like the end of Beauty and the Beast. Like, oh, if the last petal falls off the rose, then he'll die. Oh, the last petal fell off the rose. Oh, it's okay anyway.
Oh, he wasn't going to die.
What's the point of telling us the rules?
Hang on. He was going to stay
He's going to be a beast forever.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
but he was also had gotten stabbed by Gaston.
Who was not the bad guy in that movie. Gaston was the hero. We're not going to do that again either.
Okay, so since we've established that this is a soft magic system, we also have Sanderson's laws of magic that we use to evaluate. So the first law of Sanderson's laws of magic is that their ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well we understand the magic. Now, I feel like they did okay with this in that they established I don't know. I felt like I was okay with the conflict. I didn't feel like, oh no, I don't understand what's going on, so I don't know how the conflict's going to be resolved. Because it felt like the magic was just propping up the real conflict, which didn't have anything to do with the magic. It was that the grandmother was this matriarchal head that had these high expectations for everyone, and that everyone around was trying to live up to her expectations, and they were cracking under the pressure.
This is one of the good things that they did with this movie, is because they had this big flashy magic thing for all the kids to come watch in the spectacle. But the real plot, like you thought at the beginning, like, oh, the magic is failing, this is what the story's about. Not really. You found out that the magic is just one layer of it, and then you got down, and it was this inter-family communication and expectation and just relationship issues that anybody can relate to. And in that, the magic really took a back seat to a much more complicated storyline.
Yeah, so you get into it, and now you've got Bruno, who's been alienated because people don't like what his identity is, and then you have the perfect sister, but then the younger sister's jealous of her, and the expectations are too high for the oldest sister, and yeah, it starts to crumble under the pressure, and all of a sudden, this family that feels all the pressure to be the anchor and foundation of this entire town realizes they're not up to all of the expectations.
Can I also say that I love this take on future sight, because that is exactly what it would be. If you could see the future, all that does is make you realize that this idea that we have free will,
nobody actually wants to know.
Nobody wants to know, and nobody actually has free will. Because they even said it in the song where they were talking about Bruno. It's like your fate is sealed once your prophecy is read. It's like, yeah, if he sees your future and that's what's going to happen. Now you know. Now you realize it doesn't matter what choices you make up to that point. Your free will is an illusion. They will always end with you growing a gut or losing all of your hair.
Do you feel like if someone did have that, we would do like they did in the film and blame that person?
Probably, because we're always looking for ways to externalize our problems to protect our fragile ego.
There's lots of examples like this in the Christian scriptures where there's a prophet that prophesies destruction and then it comes true and they blame the prophet.
Don't shoot the messenger. But I mean,
right.
He did the smartest thing he could. He lived in the wall with the rats. Like that was his way out.
I mean, yes, I guess if you have that gift, you want to use it sparingly, or at least when it's really important. But then there was, now let's get to the second law of Sanderson's laws of magic, which is the limitations of a magic system are more interesting than its capabilities. So Bruno could see the future, but when he would look at his sister, he didn't get a clear vision of the future.
Yeah, he could see weird snapshots, and then the one vision that we walked through with him, like he even said, like it's all jumbled and out of order. Like he could see snippets of what was going to happen, but not enough of the context or the surrounding to make any sense of it. And so, like when he is giving these prophecies, like, oh, he said my goldfish would die. Yeah, because that's the most obvious thing that he could pull out of this vision that he had of you being emotionally distraught. It's like who knows like how he could interpret all that stuff.
And then the third of Sanderson's laws are expand on what you have before you add something new. So, yeah, they weren't really good at this. So, in the end, I'm going to have to, I'll say it's a soft magic system. I'm going to give them a C for their use of magic.
I'm also going to give them a C. I would give them a better grade if they didn't wimp out at the end and go for the Disney mega happy ending. So at the end of this movie, the magic, all right, spoilers everybody, the magic does completely evaporate and their house collapses, and like it seems like everything is in ruins, but then the family comes together and has this reconciliation where the matriarch realizes she's being too hard on everybody and like expresses genuine sorrow and regret for it, and they come together as a familial unit, and then the town comes like, oh, you've helped us all this time, let's help you, and they rebuilt their house. And I thought that would have been great if they'd ended right there. All the magic is gone, but everybody is better for it.
I'm with you.
That would have been...
I wonder if they debated this while they were writing the story. Like if there were people that were saying this is how we need to end it, and they lost the debate.
Maybe because they had to have the Disney mega happy ending, where we put the new doorknob on, and then all the magic in the house came back, and everybody got their gifts except Mirabelle. Mirabelle still doesn't have a gift. And that, one, it felt cheap, and two, it felt like they're setting up for a sequel. Like, oh, Encanto 2, Mirabelle's gift. I feel like that's coming.
You're probably right.
Do
you have anything else you want to add about Encanto?
the movie was okay. Watch it with your kids. But I can't stop listening to the music. I've been
It's good. I enjoy
I'm
it.
at work doing accounting, and I have the Encanto playlist just going in the background.
So I got in my car and I turned on one of the songs and it came on on a streaming service, and then it went to the next song and it was the same song again, but it was in a different language. I was like, oh, that was interesting. And then as I started going through this playlist, I think it went through 12 different languages.
Oh, geez.
And then it turned into guess the language. It was like, you don't know about Bruno, and it was first it was English, and then it was Spanish, and then it was Portuguese, I think, and then it was Italian, and then it was German, and then it was like Tagalog, and it was just all over the map, and it was fantastic. I enjoyed that out of it.
Spanish and Portuguese I can get because if this movie is aimed at South America, then yeah,
Right.
that makes sense. But
Make it accessible.
German, and I guarantee there's a Chinese version.
Yeah, there was Japanese as well.
That's just market appeal.
Now, all the voice actors are people we're kind of familiar with, but there's one that it just felt like there was no reason for it.
There is always a reason. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. So this is yet another movie where like we have an animal sidekick in one scene for 5 minutes that has no speaking lines but makes random animal noises. And so who's the man in Hollywood you call when you have this kind of role? It has to be Alan Tudyk.
Okay. What else has he done?
He was the chicken in Moana.
What?
Yeah, he was the chicken in Moana. You're gonna make me like Google it, and I will. Alan Tudyk's animal sidekick.
I smell an infographic coming on. I'll put one of our patented Bad at Magic infographics up in the Facebook page. You can go there and take a look at the album that I post with every show and see the infographic of all the animated sidekicks played by Alan Tudyk.
He was also King Candy in Wreck-It Ralph. He was the Duke of Wesselton in Frozen. He was Alistair Cray, the bad guy in Big Hero 6. He was Duke Weaselton in Zootopia.
What? Why would it be the same name? That's weird.
Oh, you're right. Weaselton. Huh. Well, he was an actual weasel in that movie.
Like, are those two universes, are those two properties in the same universe, and there's a crossover in that one character?
All right, listeners, get on this. We need a link between
Yes.
Frozen and Zootopia that is Alan Tudyk as Wesselton in the Duke. Oh, that's funny. It's the Duke of Wesselton and then Duke Weaselton. That's outstanding. That's just Disney.
Yeah.
That's just Disney goofing around. That's what
All
it
right,
is.
infographic coming up.
Anyway, he's Iago in the new Aladdin movie, 2019.
Why? Gilbert Gottfried's still around. Lame.
Hey, listen, they made all the bad decisions for the Aladdin movie. Let's not talk about that. Anyway, here's the thing. Alan Tudyk has been in so many of these movies now, and Disney has all of the money, and so all of the voice actors and all of the real actors that have ever been in anything are also in all these movies. I honestly...
I mean...
Yeah, Disney owns everything.
Yeah.
I feel like Alan Tudyk is the new Kevin Bacon.
Well, okay. Those are all the Disney animation studios. If you want to go to, like, Pixar, then you get John Ratzenberger.
So, yeah, exactly. Same thing. But
Okay.
Pixar has fewer voice actors than I think Disney has had with Alan Tudyk in these movies.
All right. I'll make an infographic.
Yeah, so Kevin Bacon was at the peak of his popularity in what? Early 90s, late 80s?
Yeah, but he never really stopped.
No, he still appears in things every now and again. But what I'm saying is this is the same thing as happened. He was in movies with freaking everybody in his heyday. That's Alan Tudyk now, buddy. Alan Tudyk is the Kevin Bacon of our time.
All right. Well, let me find out my Alan Tudyk number.
Oh, this is
Going
like
to the Internet Kevin Bacon database. It's called the Oracle of Bacon, and I'm going to find out. Let's see, Kevin Bacon to Alan Tudyk. His Bacon number is 2. Alan Tudyk was in Big Hero 6 with James Cromwell, who was in Beyond All Boundaries with Kevin Bacon. Now, on the other hand, let me find out my Alan Tudyk number. So, Alan Tudyk was in with John Goodman. Alan Tudyk was in Trumbo with John Goodman, and John Goodman was in Babe with my brother-in-law, so my Tudyk number is 2.
Wouldn't it be 3? You weren't in. You weren't in the movie.
Okay, 3.
So there you go. What's your Kevin Bacon number, sir? Also probably
Let's see.
because John Goodman was in something with Kevin Bacon, guaranteed.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, he was in Patriots Day with Kevin Bacon, so my Bacon number is also 3.
Well, you see, there you go. You are the same distance from Alan Tudyk as Kevin Bacon.
Right.
I rest my case.
Okay. It is time for let's call this bad at technology, Josh.
Are we bad at technology now too?
Yes. Well, you're better at technology than I am because you have an electric car. So let's talk about that for a minute. So I found this article and I sent it to you. And it kind of come up in the wake of the Biden administration kind of making a name for themselves in the green energy space. And one of the things that had come out of this was a very interesting idea that really intrigued me. And I sent you an article about it.
Yes.
You want to talk about it?
So I'm going to talk to a level. I don't know. I can never remember the specifics of the articles that you send me. But it was talking about energy demand, the power grid, and the number one problem that we have in energy production in the world, I think, and that is that it is a logistical supply chain with zero storage capacity.
Right, well, virtually zero. You pump energy into the grid, and it can kind of hold the current state. And there's a little bit of flux that it can surge and stuff. And in good, well-developed countries, you don't have like brownouts all the time like you might in other areas. But there just isn't enough storage capacity for you to produce too much in off-peak hours so that you have it during peak hours. You just have to increase the production at the time of need.
And that's the problem, is because the production has to happen at the same time as the demand occurs, and demand fluctuates. So as you go through the day, there's a high demand, and then it dips again as it goes into the night. But you can't just keep your energy production facilities at peak efficiency and store the excess and then draw from the excess in times that you need it. So instead of having
storage is incredibly problematic and inefficient.
Yes. The most efficient way to generate electricity is linearly. You want to have one level of electricity that you're producing at any given time at perfect peak efficiency. But since there's no storage, you can't do it that way. So the idea was that electric cars are becoming more and more popular to the point where it is possible. It's just, if you think about it, everybody thinks about it as just a car. And that's kind of what the article was talking about. Oh, that's just my car. But it's more than that. You can think of it as an enormous giant battery. And Ford is already kind of advertising this with their new electric F-150. And all their commercials, they show the power going out at some farmhouse somewhere. And then they plug in the truck, and then the truck is powering the house. I'm curious to know how long that truck could power a normal household, depending on the amperage draw and all of that, or the kilowatt hours. I don't think anybody's thought about that.
But that sounds like a cool commercial. I'll put a link in the show notes.
But that's the idea, is that now if there's enough of these, if they become prevalent enough in society, that's almost a built-in storage function that you could theoretically leverage at the nation-state level.
Okay. Right. And I love this kind of idea. I love that, hey, let's change our thinking about this and realize that instead of this just being a different version of a car, we now have a battery that happens to be able to drive places. But when it's not driving places, how can we tap into the fact that it's a giant battery? So
there's a lot of buts when it comes to that idea. So one, you have to have a threshold of electric cars that are plugged into the grid everywhere. And then two, you have to have some kind of infrastructure that exists where the car and the grid can communicate in an effective way to when they are charging to when they are discharging to try to prop up the grid.
Yes. And you're right about as far as peak consumption hours also tend to be the time that cars are driving instead of charging.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is what happens when I'm sitting at work and it's all right, time to go home, or I'm going to go home an hour early today, with my car expecting to be on the charger for another hour, and it's been discharging all day to try to support peak hours, and now my car is dead.
Yeah, but we're good at We're good at this. There's going to just be a level of saturation where the technology has become ubiquitous enough that the overall level has reached the point where it actually is starting to make a dent in the problem.
Well, right now, if you think of it this way, and this is the way that I try to think of it in the most optimal scenario, is right now the energy grid, you have an energy producer that's just trying to dish out as fast as possible to everybody that wants energy. But if we have enough of these distributed giant batteries, it becomes more of a question of the producer at one end. For some reason, I'm thinking of a school cafeteria, and everybody's already got food, and the cafeteria worker's just there okay, who needs food? And you have a handful of people that raise their hand, and then everybody's just distributing the food all over amongst themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love this idea, because if you imagine these two problems separately, then you don't have synergy. Like, okay, we need to increase the efficiency of our energy grid, and we could do that by operating at peak efficiency throughout the time period instead of surging at peak hours. But what we really need in order to do that is storage. Where do we get storage from? Well, we need batteries. All right, well, so the power company needs to buy batteries and distribute them around and install them. Those are expensive. We'd have to raise prices. The market won't do that.
I just watched this great YouTube video from this engineering channel that I make my kids watch to try to teach them things about how power companies like that store energy. And one of the most efficient ways that they have found to do that is they have giant reservoirs of water. One that is high up, like on a hill, and one that's really low.
You just use mechanical potential energy to store it.
Yes, at times you just run the power plant at peak efficiency, and then at night when it's not all that energy is not being used,
you pump water up.
You pump the water back up to the reservoir, and then during peak hours you let the water flow back through, and you generate power from that.
Yeah, and that only has like 65% return on investment.
And it takes a huge amount of like land and infrastructure to make that a reality.
Yeah, and the batteries in a car are a lot closer to, like 85 to 90% efficiency of putting energy into it and then getting it back out. So the fact that somebody said, well, wait a minute, we got all these batteries all over the place. If we can find a way to make it so that the car still meets people's needs and it also serves this greater purpose of storing surge energy in the power grid, then we can solve this problem and improve everyone's lives.
I'll tell you right now, Ben, my car on a full charge will go 180 miles, no problem.
Right.
Right now, I'm volunteering, like Biden administration, if you're paying attention. Me, Josh Fleshman in Arizona. I am willing to donate the top 80 miles of my car's battery life to the grid. As long as my car has at least 100 miles when I sit down into it, I'll probably be fine.
Yeah, wow. And then you provided something to them that they need in order to make everyone's lives better, and you get something in return, and everybody wins.
Yeah. And honestly, that's probably the way to do it, is if you let the consumer decide how much of their car they're willing to give to the grid.
Yeah, I like that. So I read this article, and I was excited about that idea. It made me want to get an electric car even more. And it also made me think about what are other ways that we've done this in society and in the past. So I tried to make a list.
Okay.
So I'll give you some examples. Like, for instance, back when there used to be drive-in movie theaters, what you would do is you would drive up to a little stake, and then next to you on the where you park your car is a little hook with a speaker on it. And you take the hook off and you hang it on the inside of your car, and you have this tinny little mono speaker that plays. Well, what happens is the wires get broken, people run into them with their cars, they don't tend to work, and if you've gone to a drive-thru, it's been operating for any amount of time, it's crappy service. And there's not a lot of incentive for them to fix it or make it better. But then technology advanced a little bit, and they realized, hey, every car out there has a stereo in it that operates pretty well. All we need to do is just broadcast on a local radio frequency the sound from the movie, and people could just tune to that station in their car and listen to it. And now the movie theater no longer has to produce and repair the speakers, and everyone gets better sound, and it's just win-win.
Are there still drive-in movie theaters? When's the last time you went to a drive-in movie theater, Ben?
It's been within your lifetime. But I'm talking about examples of the past. So,
okay.
But this is what's called a positive externality, and they're kind of rare in society. But that was one I could think of. Another one that's much more recent is smartphones. In any type of electronic application or something like that, there's usually this kind of bill, a tax that needs to be paid by technology. Like, let's say I want a remote control car, and I need a battery and a motor and some wheels and some radios and stuff, but then I also need something else that can control it. And if I'm trying to sell this to you, the consumer, maybe that's another 25% of the cost that I have to spend on trying to get a controller for it. But what if instead of spending that 25% of the cost, I can just develop an app that you can download for free from the App Store and turn your phone into the controller from that car and take that out of the case and sell it to you for 25% less.
Well, there you go. Yeah,
there's less electronic waste, there's less, and your smartphone is way more capable of anything that I could afford to put in that case for $10.
You know what? We talked about an example of this when we talked about COVID the first time, I don't even know, like a year ago. But like when we all went into full lockdown and all the schools shut down and went to online learning, Like that couldn't have happened 5 years ago because there was not the expectation that every kid just had high-speed internet connectivity.
5 years ago?
I would say that 5 years.
Wow.
That probably wasn't a given. Well,
I would say it's longer than
it is
that.
probably
but maybe
longer than that. You're right. But now, like you're identifying things that we can, like technology is coming in and we can just make these assumptions now. It was perfectly viable for the public school system to say every kid's got high-speed internet. We just need to provide some kind of device and everybody will have the connectivity that they need.
Yes. I also saw this when I was a school teacher back in 2004. There was a lot of pressure on me to utilize this classroom set of Palm Pilots they had. There were these little handheld computers with mono screens, and they had an app on them, and it was supposed to be integrating technology and enhancing learning. You had to check them out. The kids would break them. They were difficult to use. It was hard to synchronize them. It was problematic. They were always checked out by other teachers, and I just felt like a lot of pressure for very little return on investment. That was 2004. Right now, with my seminary students, every single one of them brings their own personal computer to class. They care about it. They take care of it. It's high tech. We can use it to share information, to synchronize. I distribute their tests on them. We use it to take review quizzes on it. There's apps. It's infinity better, and it's because everyone brings their own technology to the party.
Seminary class has tests?
We need to do a full interview on
We
seminary.
do. I just realized how much goes into this because I thought it was just you talking at 4 sleepy kids every day.
Nope. There's a lot more to it than that. We'll put a pin in that one. And there's more to come. They're in the near future of these things, these positive externalities that come when technology reaches a level where people can bring their technology to the party. I mean, you've probably heard of distributed supercomputing, where like your computer that's sitting or not doing anything could actually be working on something else and sharing.
You can sign up for, what do they call it, folding at home? There are labs that do like DNA genome breakdowns of, like the latest one was COVID. There were labs that were trying to use supercomputing power to break down the COVID genome so they could come up with vaccines and treatments more quickly. And you could donate the idle computing cycles of your computer in this giant distributed network and help crunch the numbers on it.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. And we'll probably get there in our lifetimes with like ride sharing or self-driving cars where a car that's sitting in your garage or in a parking lot somewhere for 99% of its lifetime now gets utilized at a much greater rate. And that is just better for everyone. It's less consumption. It's less waste. It's the future. I'm so excited.
In my sci-fi utopia, you don't even have devices. Devices just exist everywhere you go, and the only thing that follows you is your preferences.
Yeah, it's Star Trek.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, it's time for Bad Logic.
Yay, let's do Bad Logic.
It is an even episode, so it's me, and I'm going to do a fallacy. And the fallacy we're going to talk about this week is called the loaded question. Loaded question is asking a question that has an assumption built into it so it can be answered without appearing guilty. Josh, do you beat your wife often?
Hey, Ben, are you going to eat that? Yeah, this is something I think I've talked about this in the podcast before. This is that second and third order questions where you're asking this question, but it's just the start down a little journey that you want to take to lead somebody's thought processes to the same conclusion that you already have made.
Yeah, the question that I asked you sounded like a yes or no question, but it's not. It has a built-in assumption into it that you do beat your wife, and so answering yes or no, even though it looks binary, is misleading.
But here's the problem. If I then say, well, that's a false dichotomy, you're asking me a loaded question, no, I just look guilty.
Yeah, it looks like you're... But you have to do it. There's no other way. There was this moment in the movie I talked about. It was called like the Chicago 7 or the trial of the Chicago 7, and where one of the hippies that had come to Chicago to protest the war in Vietnam during the Democratic National Convention, the reporter asks him one of these loaded questions, and he kind of looks at him. He's like, "Your question assumes that he calls the reporter out.
You phrased your question in the form of a lie."
Yeah, you phrased your question in the form of a lie, man.
I was able to say that because, like a married couple that's been together for too long, I have heard this story of yours now several times. And I think our listeners might be at that point too. I apologize. We are going to start repeating ourselves the longer this podcast goes.
Yeah. Time for bad at English. So I'm going to make this a quick one. I had a British friend that said this thing that sounded like it might be a common phrase, but when I tried to look it up, I couldn't find any etymology on it. So it might just be a clever turn of phrase done by an individual, which kind of is its own category of things. Like when you go to the South, we got here in Louisiana, and my wife, who does sign language interpretation, frequently has to interpret things. And she was interpreting in a community college, and she had a student, and the teacher up at the front of the class was a very like Southern woman with like a drawl, and they would use lots of creative turns of phrase, which aren't easy to translate into sign language. And she said, "That dog can't hunt."
I've heard that's a Southern expression, a Southern idiom.
Right. A Southern idiom. And you have to think in a moment, like, what does that mean so that I can translate this into another language? Well, my British friend said, "Oh, well, that's the closest puppy to the pile of poo." And if you think of that idea, the closest puppy to the pile of poo, you think, okay, I get that. Like, I can understand what that probably means. But I couldn't find if that was a particularly British phrase.
That sounds very much like guilt by association.
Yes, guilt by association, or an idiom version of one of my favorite cognitive logical macros, which is Occam's razor.
Yep.
Most likely person that did this is the closest one.
Yeah, the simplest solution is often the correct one.
Yeah. Or maybe it's kind of circumstantial evidence. Like, yeah, you're blaming the closest one, but maybe it's not him. Anyway, it could mean any of those things.
Yeah, if you hear galloping and whinnying, think horses, not zebras.
Well, speaking of Winnie and Pooh, I got a great joke I heard this week for you, Josh.
Oh, do it.
What do Attila the Hun and Winnie the Pooh have in common?
I don't know.
Same middle name.
So does Alexander the Great.
And if you try to think about Winnie the Pooh and Attila the Hun, I don't know if they have a single other thing in common. But they have the same.
Oh, they're both actually currently a plague on China. How about that?
Yikes.
Political commentary.
Josh.
Ben.
We are behind on Board Game Survivor, so we need to talk for a minute about games. What games have you played since we last spoke?
I actually have a couple of card games that I played that I would like to talk about.
Great.
First one I played just the other day. My wife played it first. Like, it's a stocking stuffer for our kids that she'd gotten off of the internet. Said, "Oh, this is a good game for kids." Stuff it in their stockings. Played it for the first time a couple days ago, and she says, "You have to play this with the kids." And the game is called Blink, the fastest card game in the world. It's a stack of 60 cards, and the cards have shapes that are different colors on them, and there's a different number of them. So there's 5 different shapes. There's like X's and circles and lightning bolts, and then they can be any number of them from 1 to 5, and then they can be one of 5 colors. Now what you do is you split the pile of cards in half, and each person gets a pile. You take 3 of the cards, and you flip over the top card of the deck, and you just face up. Now, you can take one of your cards and put it down on either of the 2 face-up piles if the colors match, or the shapes match, or the number of objects on the card matches.
Okay, got it. Totally got it.
As soon as you throw one down, you take the next one. And whoever gets through their stack of 30 cards first is the winner.
So these are designed in such a way where it can be done. I assume there's some protocol you follow if you reach a blocker.
In the very rare occasion where neither person can play a card, both people just flip over the next card of the deck simultaneously.
Right, okay. Yeah, got it. All right, yeah, I played a game very similar to this called Set. Have you ever played Set?
Probably.
You lay out a 9x9 grid, and they have characteristics, and you just have to find ones that where the characteristics match in a set. And yeah, same. So is this a keeper?
Yeah, I think so. I was telling my son, like, this, after we played it a couple of rounds, I was telling him, like, this is a great game for you guys to play. And he goes, "Why?" And I say, "Because you are building so many pathways in your brain trying to do this under pressure." And that's the key, is your brain is trying to take these 3 things in your hand and these 2 things on the ground, and you're trying to draw logical connections between all of them simultaneously. And the time pressure makes you do it quickly. And so...
Is it only a 2-player game?
It's only a 2-player game. So
how do you interact with the other person? Can you put cards on top of theirs?
yes, you can put cards on top of either stack. And so the stacks are constantly changing.
Yeah.
The one thing that we did to try to slow us down a little bit is we have to say the matches that we're making out loud as we're putting the cards down.
Right.
Numbers, colors, shapes, lightning bolts, X's. And like whoever like gets it down first is the one that gets it down first. But it's just good cognitive and like I don't know, all those things that you want your kids to develop in their brain. It's just developing all of that. It's great.
Great. That sounds fun. What was the other one?
The other one was Unstable Unicorns. And we got this for my daughter because she loves unicorns, like all 7-year-old girls do. And honestly, the front of the box, my wife showed it to me, like, should we get this for her? And it has a drawing of a super cute, artistic, like, colorful unicorn. And it says, what does it say? Like, collect unicorns, betray your friends, unicorns are your friends now. And I was like, I'm sold. This sounds great.
The hook was for you.
Yes, it was. And we opened it and I started reading the instructions. And Ben, this is baby's first Magic the Gathering.
Really?
That's what it is the cards do different things. Like you have standard, like if you get, it doesn't matter how the game plays, you have to play unicorns. But there are magical unicorns that each have a unique ability. And someone's like, when you play this unicorn,
there's a color pie.
You can get a unicorn out of the graveyard. Or when you play this unicorn, other players can't play magical unicorns. Or if this is in play at the beginning of your next turn, you may sacrifice it and destroy another player's unicorn.
Okay.
And there's even counter spells. They're called Nay. It's
Nay.
It says
N-E-I-G-H.
N-E-I-G-H, and it's a unicorn holding a stop sign, and it just says Nay on it. And you can play it. It's the only card you can play during another player's turn, and it stops them from playing the card that they are playing. And my favorite, there is also a Super Nay. It's the same art, except the unicorn is angrier and it's more red, and it says, "This Nay cannot be nayed."
Awesome. Okay, so I assume that one's a keeper as well?
Yes. I mean, honestly, it's great because this is just as, like I said, it's baby's first Magic. This is a gateway drug into explaining, like the next time, if I ever sit down to teach my son Magic the Gathering and I plays his first counter spell, he's like, what does this thing do? It says counter spell. I'm like, oh.
It's like Nay.
It's like Nay. He goes, oh, got it. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I got it. I can't see myself getting this one, but it sounds like it's fun for your crowd.
It's one of those games that also has a ton of like expansions onto it, like this whole pack of zombie unicorns and nonsense like that. But I don't think we'll buy any of those. I think we're just going to stick with the unicorns.
Okay. Well, for me this week, but I don't know. We didn't find any time to play with family. We've been going through some of our old favorite TV shows, which we'll talk about in our feature today. But I played a bit of Magic the Gathering this week.
Yeah, you did.
My local game store has a really healthy, like, competitive Magic scene. Like, we just there's Modern on Tuesdays, Standard on Wednesdays, Commander on Thursdays. There's Friday Night Magic that's like multiple formats. And then about once a month we have a larger tournament. And it's big enough to draw people in from like Dallas.
Wow.
People from Dallas come over here, which is now the third biggest city in the United States. Come over to Shreveport, Louisiana, which is like the 141st biggest city in the United States, and play in our Magic tournaments. So we had 33 players here today in Shreveport for a Modern 1K that was a qualifier for a $5,000 tournament they've got coming up in a month. So I joined with my usual Ponza deck. I lost in the first round. I was feeling a bit disheartened because there was only going to be 5 rounds of Swiss, but then I went 4-0 and I qualified for top 8. I won the first round and I made the top 4 and we split the prizes, and I'm now qualified for the 5K next month.
Not only are you qualified for the 5K, but you walked away with cash money.
Yeah, I got like $200 in prizes. Not bad for my $40 entry fee.
You are a semi-pro Magic player. At what point are you going to admit that? You have made more money playing Magic than I have.
Yeah, I don't know. Josh, I got to tell you, it really fed my what do we call it? Feeding the dragon?
Yes, or chasing the dragon.
It really fed. Oh my gosh, there were times where just my heart was racing and I was sitting on the edge of my seat and I was breathing hard and it went right and I would be done and I would just feel elated and satisfied. Oh my gosh, it was so great.
Now, Ben, you look me in the eyes and you tell me, at any point during this day, did you have that split-second thought where, like, I'm getting out of the military. I could do this. This could be my full-time gig. I could just be the professional Magic guy.
It's become such a different thing now that Wizards has gotten rid of actual professional Magic players. You kind of got to be like a success on Twitch or YouTube or something like that. I don't see that as viable for me at all.
You don't think?
No.
Nobody's going to tune in to Ben Rich. Like you
No, and I'm not interested in fostering my personality and hoping that the fickleness of fans out there will help me support my family. No, not interested in
I
that.
bet you could develop a nice niche. Are you capable of drafting a winning vintage cube deck while teaching a seminary lesson? If you could do those simultaneously, I think you could carve a nice wedge in the zeitgeist here.
So, Board Game Survivor, we're keeping Blink, Unstable Unicorns, and Magic the Gathering.
Is Magic the Gathering ever going to get axed? Like, why are we even talking about that?
Because we're bad at it.
Touché.
So, for our main segment today, I was looking just for something that we could do kind of on a recurring basis. It's a little bit meatier. And this, I said to you, is called TV tropes. And you're like, well, I don't want to watch a lot of TV, which I would say is not necessarily true. But because you quote TV shows to me all the time. Family Guy and Rick and Morty. And
Remembering all of the TV that I've ever consumed is different than watching TV right now.
I got it. But what you don't realize is happening inside of your brain when you're watching all these TV shows and movies and books and video games is that your brain is laying down pathways where you're trying to form patterns. And that's what a trope is. A trope is a convention or device that establishes a predictable or stereotypical representation of a character, setting, or scenario in a creative work.
And this is why I asked you. Like, my response when you said, hey, you want to talk about TV tropes? I said, can we talk about storytelling tropes instead? I am more interested in that.
Yes. And I thought I made it clear that, yes, that's what we're talking about.
We're talking about
any
tropes.
Tropes. But the reason I call it TV tropes is there's a great website that's called that, but it's about everything. It's just the website's called TV tropes.
It's funny because I think in our culture of binge watching, people are starting to recognize it way more than they did back in the day. I remember
that's interesting.
I remember my parents, we watched Frasier whenever it was on, whatever random night that it was on while it was still being aired. And my parents loved that show, and I did too. And it was funny and interesting and entertaining, and it felt very highbrow and high class because the people in that were such highbrow, high class, sophisticated people, and that was part of the humor. But my wife and I, just like a couple of years ago, binged watched all of Frasier on a streaming service. And Ben, buddy, you can only watch like 4 or 5 episodes of Frasier before you have their formula down. Like those.
So you're saying if you were watching it like weekly when it would come out one season at a time, you weren't consuming it quickly enough to see the code in the Matrix.
Yes. Frasier only has about 4 or 5 different episodes that they air, and they're just a little different every time.
They rotate through them.
Yeah, and it's just so formulaic, and all right. So I can't even say like 20% of their episodes end in some dinner party that's going horribly askew because of some cascading lie that happened. Like, oh, they told a little white lie at the beginning, and they had to keep building on it until they get into this crazy scenario by the end of it. And the most radical thing that they did is late in like their fifth or sixth season, they started the episode with the conclusion of one of those episodes. Like the episode started and they were already neck deep in this cascading lie at a dinner party. And the whole episode was about, we can't do this again. We can't keep like faking like having these parties or whatever. And that was like one episode that shook it up, and then it went right back to their formula.
Yeah. Exactly. They're using the fact that you were starting to notice the pattern as a new storytelling device.
Yes.
Now, Josh, you've heard me, speaking of repeating ourselves on the Bad at Magic podcast, you've heard me say before, every generation likes to think they invented sex. And kind of like you were saying, yeah, we're getting better at this. I don't know if that's true. Every generation likes to think they invented storytelling. Storytelling is as old as mankind.
That's true.
The tropes that we have are different versions of the same things, but if you think of the old ones, like think of fairy tales and stories, you've got your damsel in distress, your wicked witch, your knight in shining armor, you've got your minions and all these kinds of things that fit together to tell a story that evokes human emotions and relates to us as common humans.
Well, and this goes back to the idea of memes too, is because we've been telling stories for so long, like the stories that get propagated are the best versions of these stories. And so they just get refined over time. And I'm thinking of Homer with the Iliad and the Odyssey. like from
Yes, exactly. Or
prehistory.
Greek mythology or Roman mythology, or
Yes.
they're just stories that we're telling over and over. And there's the monomyth and all those kinds of things. So this week, my son and I were sitting here and we were looking for something to watch on Netflix, and I was stumbled across Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie. That came out in 1990.
The original.
The original. I thought I'd watched this one a lot, but I realized I must have watched the sequels a lot more because I maybe only saw this one once because I didn't remember it at all. And one thing that really surprised me is how much time in this movie they invested into establishing the characters of the Minions. Like in the Saturday morning cartoon, there was the Foot Clan. They had the masks on. They showed up in just countless numbers out of nowhere. You never questioned their motivation. They assumed you knew the trope of a minion. A minion is someone who's unreasonably loyal to the bad guy at great peril, and there's just enough of them to be a problem for the good guys. But in this movie that came out in 1990 with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they were like these kids from neglected homes in New York City that wandered down into the bad neighborhood looking for something to feel alive about, and they were adopted by these guys that were ousted from this Japanese gang and basically trained in martial arts and turned into minions.
Yeah. It's like you are searching, you don't know it, but you are looking for belonging, a sense of being a part of something greater than yourself. We will provide that in exchange for petty crime.
So I told you that so I can tell you this. I realized that added virtually nothing to the movie. Like, it just felt like a waste of time. There was this one stupid character that was like April O'Neil's boss's son that became one of the Foot Clan. And it's good that we have these tropes. Like, that we can just have minions show up out of nowhere and we don't question where they came from or what their motivation are. We don't need to spend a half hour of this movie giving them a reason to exist.
We had a whole, I don't know if this was our primary episode or a bonus episode, where we talked about minions. We talked about action movies where security guards, I'm doing air quotes, security guards in all black body armor helmets and ski masks with assault rifles come pouring out of doors like, there are more security guards in this building than office workers. What are we doing here? But it serves the plot and the action.
I sent you this great one-panel comic this week, a meme. It was like of a wrestler jumping off the top rope to take out some poor guy, and it was Batman, and the guy that was about to get hit is some poor worker at LexCorp trying to work overtime to buy Christmas gifts for his children.
Yep, and here comes Batman, gonna put me like in the hospital in full traction just because
I'm just doing my job,
man. I'm just supposed to keep people out of this building. I don't know what's going on.
So these tropes exist. They're efficient. They save time in storytelling, which is good. They and they're comfortable. You know, we come to know them, and they're predictable, and they're things that we know, and then they help us participate in the storytelling process. So speaking of Batman, I read a new trope this week called the Batman Paradox. I love this one. The Batman Paradox is that in the DCEU, that there are literal gods, but Batman can still contend with them as long as he has enough time to prepare. What?
This is all right. So this is why Batman is the most beloved character from DC Comics, is because he's the only one with any real limitations. There's canonic.
That's the second law of magic. Limitations are more interesting than the capabilities.
Yes. Canonically, Superman can lift 5 quintillion tons with one hand. Why do we care? At what point are the stakes going to be high enough that we think Superman's going to die? Like it just doesn't exist. But there is an entire story arc.
That's why they had to introduce kryptonite.
The only interesting DC comics are the ones where everything goes wrong. I don't want to go. Can I go? All right, for 1 second. Like the most.
Okay, but the trope is that Batman is just a human, but we believe that he can contend, that he can be a player in this arena with Superman and I can't name DC guys, but
all of them. Wonder Woman, the Green Lantern,
right? Also a
Martian Manhunter.
Yes,
there was a point where Green Lantern tried to reassemble a planet, including rehabilitating with all the life with just the power of his ring, and like he almost pulled it off. Like crap, like that. Yeah. just frustrated noises. Yeah, that's all I've got.
Another trope I read this week that I absolutely love, very timely since we just came through the holiday season, is the Kevin McAllister paradox. And that is, maybe you never stopped to ask yourself this, but while his parents were in Paris and realized that they left their son in Chicago, why on earth were they not able to get a hold with a single solitary human that was able to make contact with Kevin?
I never found, like, did they not have a phone? Like, did their house not have a phone?
They weren't able to talk to him. They weren't able to get a neighbor, a friend, a family member, the police. Nobody made contact with him.
My son has a watch that has 5G. Like, I can get a hold of my son anywhere on the planet at almost any time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But given '90s tech, we had pay phones and maybe a cell phone or a cordless phone.
Did the McAllister house not have a phone with one of those old timey answering machines with the tape recorder that played on the speaker?
It's a paradox, but it was the trope that was necessary for this story to go on.
It's true. Constant tropes you see all the time are the love triangles. How many romantic comedies are built on this idea of girl meets boy, girl likes boy, boy doesn't like girl, girl likes other boy likes girl now, boy has to convince girl to break up with other boy so girl can get with boy.
So if we just accept this because it drives a story along, are you saying these don't happen in real life?
I'm saying not in the way that they're portrayed in these tropes. It's like, but we just expect, like, all this does is pad the runtime. Like, we're watching a romantic comedy. We know that the two main characters are going to get together. The whole idea is how long can they draw it out, or how many problems can they have before they get there.
Okay, so you're saying in this case the trope of a love triangle is simply there to increase the stakes or lengthen the time it takes for resolution in a love story?
Or create situations where you can try to resolve the love story in an interesting or funny or dramatic or sometimes murderous way.
Okay, that took a dark turn. I can't think of a love triangle.
Fatal Attraction.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, okay. Well, there's movies. Where was it? Where like the girl likes the boy, but the boy likes another girl, and so the girl replaces the other girl. Like, just shows up. Like, is like, I've always been this girl. Why are you freaking out all of a sudden? Oh, The Swimmer, or the Swim Fan. Swim Fan is a movie that does that.
Okay, I'm kind of aware of that one.
There you go.
All right, I got a new trope for you. The surprise party.
Have you ever had a surprise party?
No, never.
I don't think anybody ever has.
No, but it's a common trope in television shows and movies, but particularly television shows, where, like, your main character, they've got, whatever, their birthday coming up or something they're celebrating, and everyone pretends like they don't care about it or they don't know about it. The person feels like no one loves them. They show up at the place, everyone jumps out and yells surprise, and they're like, oh, you do love me. That's the trope.
Or the other trope is the person comes in and is in a situation or starts saying things that under the assumption of privacy.
Right. And then everyone's there hiding in the dark somehow.
Yes, and it's just terrible.
And in that case, the surprise party trope is being used to create this really embarrassing situation. So in one case, it's like the tension of feeling like no one loves you, but they actually do. And the other case, it's the tension of creating like an embarrassing situation that we're supposed to find be funny. But again, that never happens in real life. A trope that's a particular pet peeve of mine, I call the second gun. This tends to happen in like revenge-based action movies where we don't really, the producers and directors seem to assume that we don't really want to see actual justice happen and we just want the bad guy to get shot.
Oh, are we? So, okay, is this the idea where the good guy gives the bad guy the opportunity to walk away? Or like, oh, I feel like now that I've killed your entire organization without blinking an eye, I'm not going to kill you because I'm better than that. And they like turn their back. But then like the bad guy does something so bad that, oh, well, obviously he has to die now. And then the hero turns and in the diving, like dodge of the bullet, like kills the bad guy.
Yes, exactly. Probably the one that immediately comes to mind is from a Michael Bay movie, of course, Bad Boys. At the very end, you know, they've disarmed the ultimate bad guy. He's laying out there on the runway. They're like, oh, we want to shoot you, but we're cops and we can't do that. And then he reaches down, lifts up his pant leg, pulls out another gun, and then they both shoot him.
Didn't they like blow up a whole house? earlier in that movie.
Yeah,
with a bunch of
yeah,
people in
yeah.
it. Like, don't pull this. Oh well, we're cops. We
It's
kill
annoying.
people.
What I want is to go back and refilm the end of that movie and be like, he pulls out the gun or he reaches for his ankle and the gun's not there and they kind of hold it and wave him and then we cut to like a courtroom and they're like, the next defendant is defendant 413.
It turns into a really bad courtroom drama. No,
Yeah.
the version of that movie I want to see is where they're both pointing the gun at him, and one of them starts saying like, "Oh, we're not going to kill you because we're cops," and the other one just unloads his entire magazine into the guy.
Well, see, you bring that up, and I laughed when you said it because it breaks the expectation of the trope.
Yes, the trope being
There's only two ways for that trope to play out. It's we say we don't want to shoot you, and then you give us a reason that we have to, and we do it anyway. But what you described is something completely different.
Well, if we're talking about action movies, there are so many action movie tropes that just go so over the top. Like, for example, the one that has been at the top of the list forever now is John Wick. There's 10 minutes of movie where then the bad guy does something so irredeemably and obviously evil that it justifies every action that happens for the good guy for the rest of the movie.
In the first John Wick movie, they kill his puppy.
And after that, like, yes. Like, I want
That's it.
I want Keanu Reeves to kill everyone on screen.
80 people.
Yeah, at least. They have to die because that poor dog.
Yeah. Another trope that it tends to be in like romantic comedies is the wrong person speaks first trope. Are you familiar with this trope?
Yes, both people, it's like, I have something to say. Oh, good, I have something to say too. Oh, you go first. And then they say something entirely different or completely at odds with what the other person was going to say.
Right, and it throws the whole thing off and it buys the movie another 30 minutes before they rectify and redeem the
classic.
I feel like
the classic is the female sitting down, be like, I have something to say, and the boy goes, let me go first, and then he proposes, and then she breaks up with him.
Yeah. I feel like this trope would never happen in real life. I hate any movie that uses it. The like wrong person speaks first.
Well,
No.
we could take a step back from that and just recognize right now, like, okay, listeners, spoilers for every movie that you're going to see for the next 20 years. If people in movies talked like human beings, there wouldn't be any problems. Like, there would be nothing to resolve. Because, like, a normal human conversation between two people would solve 90% of the issues that these characters have.
Yeah. Now, here's a trope that I used to like and I don't anymore. It's the War of the Worlds ending trope.
Oh, no. This was superseded by the Star Wars prequels. Spoilers for Star Wars, everybody.
No, I'm talking about the original War of the Worlds that was a radio broadcast by Orson Welles back in the 50s or something.
Okay, well, I'm talking about a different one, and I want to talk about mine. So you go ahead. You go first.
Right. No, it's the same one.
Oh, well,
it's the same trope.
Well,
but Orson Welles did it back in the 50s, long before Star Wars: The Phantom Menace.
It doesn't matter because now the verbiage that you use when this happens, and what we're talking about, everybody, is spoilers for Star Wars. Yes, is at the end of Phantom Menace, our young hero Anakin, the slave who somehow got into a fighter jet and knew how to work it and got into orbit and then into a space battle and then into so many stupid things. He blew up the mothership and then all of the robots that were in all of the other battles on the planet just fell over and died.
Instantly stopped working.
And now we literally call that, and they all died Phantom Menace style.
Yeah, okay, yes, that's the trope. I call it War of the Worlds because that was the same thing. We have aliens that invade the Earth. They have the technology to transverse light years of distance, come here to the Earth, and in order to build tension, whatever the intellectual property is, creates a situation where their technology is vastly superior to ours, they're just completely outnumber us, and there's no way we could ever possibly defeat them. And then Deus Ex Machina, something happens and it completely undoes them and we win. So the idea, I guess, is that the narrative is building the tension of hopelessness, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes the thing which saves you. In Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, it was Anakin blowing up the mothership that's controlling all the droids. In War of the Rings, it was the fact that the aliens' immune systems weren't immune to simple diseases on Earth, and they all got the flu and died.
that was War of the Worlds. And then Lord of the Rings, at the end of that movie, they're completely surrounded by the Orcish army. But when Sauron died, for some reason, they all got swallowed by the earth for no reason.
Yep, and in Avengers Endgame, Thanos brought his entire army through the wormhole to Earth, or through the quantum realm to Earth, and they're all here, and their ship is blowing the crap out of us, and then Tony snaps his fingers, and they all disappear.
But he had the Infinity Gauntlet. That was canon.
Okay.
Don't you dare ruin Marvel Cinematic Universe for me.
Then let's talk another trope, the Artifact of Doom.
Ah, yes, the Super MacGuffin.
Yes, exactly. So in the Avengers saga, of course, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah, because it has, and aptly named, sir, the Infinity Gauntlet can do anything. You have the powers of a literal deity. When even there are deities in the movie, I guess, but no, you have all of the power that you would expect an omnipotent being to have when you are wielding the Infinity Gauntlet. And you are limited to nothing, and yet somehow it was still an even fight between...
And yet they were. If you remember in Avengers Endgame, there's a scene where Hulk talks about what was going through his mind after he snapped to bring everyone back. And he said he tried to bring back Kat, but he couldn't do it.
Nat.
He said I tried to, but I couldn't. So there are limitations. But yes, the Artifact of Doom is a trope. The Lord of the Rings saga has the one ring of power.
The one ring to rule them all.
Artifact of Doom.
in the Magic the Gathering, during the Brothers' War, in the artifact cycle, they had the Silex of, I can't remember the proper noun, but there was an artifact, it was a bowl, that destroyed the entire world. And Mishra had it for a while, and then Urza got it, and then somebody used it and blew everything up.
Good. That's a great one. I was researching these tropes, and I found one that I loved called One Steve Limit.
One Steve Limit.
The One Steve Limit thing is what you and I talk about sometimes, about how people just have a finite capacity for consuming proper nouns. And so when you're telling a fictional story to someone, you very deliberately make a choice to not have people with the same name or similar sounding names.
Oh.
Even though in real life you frequently have
That's
this.
Interesting. Yes, groups can frequently have a person with the same name, but that never happens in movies. I never thought about that.
Right. So the only time they'll break this is if they're like twins and have rhyming names, or if it's funny to do it. Like in the classic 80s comedy Newhart, I'm Daryl and this is my other brother Daryl. Like it was funny.
But it's
other
a throwaway
than that,
gag.
Yes, it's a throwaway gag. But so I found this cute little shot from a classic episode of Phineas and Ferb where they show up at a convention called the Steve Convention, and all the characters are named Steve. And it's a play on this idea that for some reason is called the One Steve Limit. That's the trope.
Interesting. Have you ever seen Not Another Teen Movie?
No. I avoided the whole family
The parody
of
movies.
parodies where they're not really funny, they're just referencing
This
things.
is a related trope, and it talks to how not diverse a lot of Hollywood movies have been historically. And this parody movie, they were at a teenage, just a party, the generic party where everybody's 20-something and they're drinking kegs and there's no supervision around.
Okay, and so everything that's happening in this party is tropes.
Yeah, that's all it was. But then the token black guy, that's what he says. Like he's introduced with
Right. His name is Token Black
I'm just
Guy.
the token black guy. I'm just here to say stuff like, and he says some things that I'm not going to repeat. But then he goes up to another black guy at the party. He goes, hey, how's it going? I'm supposed to be the only black guy at this party. And he looks around and goes, the other guy's like, oh, my bad. I'm sorry. Here. And he hands him his beer, and then he leaves.
Yeah, exactly. When you know these tropes, then you can play on them for humor or tension, especially if you break them when you think you've identified a trope and then it doesn't follow what you expected.
That's the pleasant. That's when we're talking. All right, it's coming full circle because that's what we talk about when we talk about subversion of expectations. What you expect to happen, the reason that you're expecting to happen is because subconsciously you are programmed to expect these tropes to pop up in your stories, in the media and the fiction that you consume. And when it doesn't happen, it feels like a surprise. And that's the subversion of expectations that we're talking about.
Yes. Okay, so when I think of what you just described, the number one movie that comes to mind is Payback with Mel Gibson. Did you ever see that one?
You've talked about it enough.
Okay. All right. It's what did it for me. Another trope that I found while I was researching these is training the peaceful villagers.
Okay.
Like when you think of that, you can probably think of dozens of examples. Here's a few I thought of. In Mandalorian, they had an episode where he, trained the peaceful villagers before they come back with the AT Walker.
Yep. There's
in A Bug's Life, the grasshoppers are going to be coming back, so the circus guys are training everyone to prepare to fight back against the grasshoppers. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, they're like, oh, we're not fighters, we're just farmers. And then Robin Hood teaches them all to shoot the bow and arrow so that when the Sheriff of Nottingham shows up with the mercenaries, they're ready to fight. It's a pretty common trope.
Yeah, in The Three Amigos,
Yeah, that's a great one.
At the end of that one, they had everybody dress up as the Three Amigos, and they fought off El Guapo and his
That
horde.
one's fantastic. Because they don't teach them to fight. They just it's silly.
The end of that movie was awesome.
Yeah. I'm That's a good one. Let's end on that one.
Well, all right then.
Okay.
So
next
time you spoil, or you didn't spoil, you said that we are going to do a book review, and that we're going to read Artemis by Andy Weir. Yep. This is I've already read it. I thought we were doing it this time, and so I consumed it a little too early. I will say that it was a delightful departure from some of the other books that you've recommended. I enjoyed listening to it, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Great. I'm about 5 chapters in, so I'll finish it before we record next time. So, audience, if you want to join in on the reading, Artemis by Andy Weir, link in the show notes.
Also full of tropes that we can talk about.
Great. If you heard anything that you liked today and you want to join in on the discussion, we have a subreddit on reddit.r/baditmagic, or you can go to Facebook and search up the Bad at Magic page and join in on the discussion with us there.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. I feel like that's the least you can do. If you like what we talk about, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket right now and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It is crazy the visibility we get on something like that. And if you want me and Ben to talk about nonsensical TV tropes and board games and stupid card games for the rest of time, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.